we're looking for the questions and the other panel members.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, here's one.
Oh, God.
I got one.
Okay. Tanya Krasnova wants to know what would be the next thing the world's government is preparing for us, parentheses, after COVID. What could it possibly be, or would it possibly be something related to water? I'm not exactly sure what she's getting at there with the reference to water. Anybody have an idea how to answer that one? Michael Merklin answers maritime jurisdiction. Okay. You want to field this one for us, Will?
I was just going to take a shot at it. She might be referring to a scarcity of clean, fresh water, which, you know, that's what the government and the social engineers are always portraying, right? That there's a scarcity going on. Gas prices are raising now. There's a lumber shortage and food supply is going down. And, you know, when you're dependent, when you have the aggregate, the majority of people dependent on government institutions, they're going to pull these strings, and it's really going to mess with people. And I think, you know, something that James was talking about, you know, taking action and being self-sufficient. I think those are important measures to take and understand. That's something that I implement in my homeschooling and unschooling programs with my daughter. We forage, right? So that's a shot in the dark. So
that was a terrific answer, Will. Maybe we're still having some audio technicals because I was hearing a lot of echo. And I'll go ahead and build on top of that. Yeah, I agree. Self-preservation is the government's highest directive. So to create an artificial scarcity or a manufactured lack is always in its best interest. As to exactly, you know, what the next phase of the program is, you know, who can say, but we can pretty much guess based on the trajectory that we see that it will be some form of manufactured lack or artificial scarcity. So I hope that helps bring some clarity to that, Tanya, and thank you for the question. So do we have another question here we can field while we're here? I know Will and I have answered some of these in the text threads, but we can go ahead and address it here now. I'm still not seeing all the questions, but I'll go into Discord.
I can answer, or I can ask a question real quick for you, Doug. How far back into the Egyptian history can the Essene tradition possibly be traced in any form or by any names? And that's by Harold Mitchell.
Yeah, I can probably bring some clarity to that. I mean, we have to go with, you know, the history that we have, and then what's considered prehistory in academia. I think we could safely say that the Jewish sect we know as the Essenes is post-Babylon, in the sense that it's part of prehistory. Somebody also had asked earlier if they had a connection to the Essenes, and I would say what we're talking about is the earlier forms have the potential to be more pure forms than what we were provided by with this Roman church. It's the answer is it has potential for ambiguity, but my take on it is that most of that prehistory that we worked with comes from the Jewish Torah and the Hebrew doctrines. See, one thing we have to understand is that the Hebrews never really understood the Egyptians, and they took from Babylon what was already a corrupted Egyptian. And the Greeks never understood the sign language, and Rome took from them their perversions, which classical scholars have perpetuated into the modern world. So I hope that brings some clarity to that. What else do we got?
I don't see any more questions, but do any of the speakers have any questions or anything they'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I just want to say congratulations and great job, Brandon and Nate and everyone, the whole team, man. This was a phenomenal day of just incredible information, and the presentations were so valuable. And this is what it's all about: taking in that information and then contemplating on it, and then putting action into play. So good job on setting up a first phenomenal, successful day, and thanks for having me, for sure.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Will, for everything you do with the One Great Work Network. So you're much appreciated, and your presentation is definitely worth more than you know. So awesome job, man. Let's see. I think we got one more question that just came in. So Dylan or James says, how much of the current state of the human condition can be attributed to the possibility of cosmic abandonment? Anybody want to take that one?
Nate, can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. The question was, how much of the current state of the human condition can be attributed to the possibility of cosmic abandonment?
I would say a lot, right? If we don't know our history and we have fragments of it that we're putting together, if we don't know who we are, this is valuable information. And I think that's why Douglas's presentation was just phenomenal. These are the pieces that we need to put together to learn more about ourselves. And unfortunately, the social engineers and dark influencers, they do hold that information, and they're using it against us. And that's how they hold this valuable information of human psychology and origins, and they use it against us. So for sure, I think it comes into play.
Yes, I would corroborate that. That was a very good answer, Will. If we don't know our true origins, then we can't know the source ideas and isolate where the dogma begins. So the whole idea is to restore the source ideas so we can isolate the dogma and flesh it out. So I hope that helps, if I fully understood the question correctly.
Let's see, we got another question by Ray Hallstrom. Says, what is our best way to overcome the tyranny that we see in the world today?
Any takers on that one? How about Dylan? You want to take that one, Dylan?
Yeah, sure. So maybe this is a little bit of a silly way to answer, but read books, lift weights, buy ammunition, and you know, don't look at porn. Get ready to flip cars over and burn down federal buildings. Um, no, I mean, really, it's like I think that people should take an extremely hands-on approach to how they go about educating people. So the one of the things that I tried to speak to in my presentation a bit is that we have a very insular nature to what it is that we do here, and we can talk to each other. But the problem is talking to people who don't have any of this information. So how do you go about exposing yourself and then speaking to people who would never encounter this and then making it digestible for them? Um, what I have seen for me personally is that anything that I do where I interact with a person by proxy, if I interact with someone on the internet, basically it's not productive at all. If I can interact with someone face to face, generally that is where I'm going to find value in trying to change their mind and trying to bring a little bit of illumination to what's going on.
Yeah,
I like that.
I'll speak to that. That's amazing. My motto is the prepper and the propagator. So I prepare for all situations, and I learn life skills and sufficiency techniques and knowledge and put it in practice, right? And then also the propagation of what's going on in reality and natural law and human psychology, and it's obviously action. We need to talk about this information. um, my partner John and I at Natural Freedom League, we call it breaking the algorithm. We actually get out in the streets, and it's night and day when you're talking to someone face to face and looking them in the eye, and it increases your communication skills and your rhetoric as well, because you're learning a lot about yourself when you're speaking to someone face to face and they don't have 5-10 minutes a day to actually type something and reply to you. So it's definitely has a huge impact, and action. So find your niche, understand yourself and your attributes, and then put those in play. It can be painting, music, spoken word, whatever, but starting something, definitely.
Agreed.
I'll
Well
chime
said.
in on that one if you don't mind. Ultimately, ignorance is the true adversary. So the real solution is proper education. And as my take on it is that the education that we need was lost in the mystery schools, because Rome had packaged and labeled the exoteric doctrine and then went to war on the mystery schools to stamp out the esoteric teaching of the exoteric doctrines. So ignorance is the true adversary, and proper education is really the only true solution. And that's a responsibility that we all need to share and be willing to endeavor to accomplish as one great work, if you will.
Let me see. We got another question. How prevalent was Gnosticism in Judea at the time of Jesus or pre-Jesus? Sorry, I didn't say that right. You want to?
I would say, I'm going to take that one. I would say that it's on the wane at that point. After 500 BC, I would say it was definitely on the wane. And then I would say with the rise of the Roman Empire, their primary directive became to eradicate it entirely. And we also have to understand that Gnosticism reaches deeper into the Egyptian mythology with the Coptic Egyptians. So Gnosticism, we can say it's a little bit ambiguous, but it goes pretty far back. And the point is, it's a more pure teaching of the solar doctrine, which was corrupted in an anthropomorphized form. And that's what gave rise to this monotheism. So that's, plaguing our world today. So I hope that brings some clarity to that. There's ambiguity in it. So to give you a definitive of that, wouldn't, couldn't necessarily be 100% accurate, but the whole idea is to understand how the mythos is evolving, and then that helps us to start understand this missing timeline. And then, once we get a handle on that, we can start looking at the temples and the archaeology and really start to understand what we're seeing or digging up in the dirt.
Yeah, I like that. Let me see here. Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Let's go to the next question.
Well, I went to the next question, but it's not a question. So I'm trying to formulate a question in my head about the I guess I'm trying to understand how the stellar cult was how it was eroded into Judaism or corrupted into Judaism. How would you explain that? How you talk about the stellar cult and how it evolved and then was corrupted into Judaism.
Yeah, what we have to understand is that Judaism is a deteriorated form of an ancient stellar doctrine that's far anterior to dynastic Egypt, even. And that the Islamic religion is a remnant of the lunar. So what I would tell you is these are both very modernized, deteriorated solar forms of a once pure lunar and pure stellar doctrine. Essentially, they were assigned the tenets of the remnant. And it's a really long story to be able to fully explain. One of the things that I would say is during the cult of Amen-Ra, that is 80,000 years ago, is that the solar priests that wanted to venerate in day sky migrated into the north and gave rise to what we know as modern day Babylon. And it didn't take long before they ended up with a completely corrupted form of the Egyptian, which, in the prehistory era, the Hebrews took from Babylon. One of the most important things to understand is that what are seen as the evil spirits in modern doctrines were benevolent spirits in the ancient doctrines. So it's a complete corruption of a much more ancient doctrine. And one of the most important things to understand about the ancient pure forms is they took such a long period of time to develop and understand. That's why we can't afford to lose that knowledge, because the amount of time it took to develop that knowledge hasn't even been equaled by the amount of time that has passed since it's been lost. So that's what makes that ancient knowledge and understanding how they discovered this science of causality so important, because it took so long to develop and understand and develop these methods that we find in the mystery schools to teach and pass that knowledge forward for progeny and posterity.
Did anybody else want to add to that? Yeah, thank you, Doug. Okay. Is Nathan Redette on here or no? Or Mark Devlin? Wanted to know if they wanted to say something. No? All right.
I'll say
Well,
something about the mythos, and I'll bring it in with the whole conscious parenting thing. I actually I use the stories of the mythos as bedtime stories and stories with my daughter. There's phenomenal value in learning about these archetypes and learning about psychology and history. You know, kids love stories, and we have the traditional fairy tale stories, and the mythos are just as entertaining and way more powerful than these cheesy ass made up fairy tales. So that's my comment. But serious answers, it's hard to go after Douglas.
I understand. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's awesome, Will. That's very inspiring because it's it's simple and it's pure and it's it's definitely something that is I think it's so easy for kids to understand the moon, the sun, and the house and the stars, so it's really cool that you're doing that. Is there anybody else that had any more questions? I didn't see any more questions in the Q&A. Oh, Walter Wright Jr. said, how would the structure of the society or of society be under natural law? Does anybody else want to take that?
Well, the structure would be the knowledge of natural law itself, knowing these principles, knowing non-aggression and self-defense, and having you teach this to your young, and it would be common knowledge or common sense. That would be the foundation. That would be structure, natural structure, since we are in an artificial mechanism right now, which is government. So it's a false mental construct. So yeah, definitely living in harmony with nature is understanding the principles and living by them.
What do you think, Dylan?
So I don't know that there is one way that I can answer that, because I think that it's going to be regionally different. It's going to be different among different groups of people. Basically, people are predisposed to organize themselves in ways that are related to their history. It's one of the things that I like that Douglas talks about, is that we need to have an understanding of our history, because it would be like imagining a tree without roots continuing to grow. So if you don't have a relation to your roots, then there isn't really an option for you to continue growing. I don't know that I can say, so like for myself, I'll say, how would I want to live? Basically, I just want to be an agrarian person. Like that is my ideal form of how I would live, is I would pretty much live in the woods and I'd grow potatoes and onions. Now, that isn't the way that many other people want to live. The idea is that we're trying to create I guess, a voluntaristic society, right? So it's this enlightened society where you have, at the individual level, people are so knowledgeable of morality that there is no need for any form of a coercive or involuntaristic institution. I don't know that I can answer accurately what the structure would be now, because I don't even know that we have a structure that can facilitate getting us there currently.
Yeah, it seems to be that way, huh?
I'll throw in something real quick. Yeah, that was good. And that's an extremely common question. People always want to know, well, what is the society going to look like? What is the structure? And the answer is, we don't know, but we do know that what we're living in now is artificial and it's immoral. And we understand that the principles of natural law, but what we're really talking about in the ideal condition is a completely different level of consciousness. So who knows what that's going to look like, but we know what we need to do now. We're living in immoral, violent conditions. So the action and the time is now, what we're currently living in.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that. Are we fielding the question from Walter Wright Jr. because he asks, how would the structure of society be under natural law? And that's what I'm going to build on. So it's a great question, and I would partly try to answer that by saying that, you know, this idea of a top-down coercive control hierarchy is a big part of our fallacy. It would probably have to be the opposite of that, which would be a bottom up type hierarchy in service of truth. And that doesn't mean that somebody at the top of the hierarchy has more power than somebody at the bottom. It means that somebody at the top of the hierarchy has more knowledge and has the respect for others that want to gain and understand that knowledge. But we're not talking about a control system. You know, we're talking about a bottom up hierarchy in service of truth, which I would call source, you know, service to the science of causality, if you will. And as long as we're pursuing our personal ambition, then we're breaching that responsibility to truth. And, you know, the idea is that that level of morality would manifest a paradise instead of manifesting the hell that we're manifesting under man's law. So it's a difficult topic, and I don't want to be misunderstood with it. But I would say it was about respect for elders, but the elders can't compromise their principles, and that no one should be really living better than somebody else. That there's plenty to go around. You know, I think the beautiful thing is that part of the great big spiritual lesson is that we all have to learn to share and care about things that matter, which is the science of causality, and we all have a responsibility to learn it and know it. And many hands make light work. So, you know, the mess that we're in now, it's like trying to swim out against the ebb of the tide. And, you know, we've created this mess for ourselves. We can still get out there, but it's going to take a lot more effort. And best thing I could say is that many hands make light work, because, you know, doing this, you know, in today's world it's, you know, you're probably going to find yourself completely in exile. So we're going to have to, you know, really start to center around understanding that we're talking about knowledge that took a long time to learn and understand, and that it is the knowledge that if we do learn, we're not going to be controlled because we're going to evolve. So what they want to do is stagnate our evolution. And as long as we're stagnated in our growth, we're going to be much more easily to control. So, you know, I can go on and on about this, but let's hear what somebody else has to say about it.
This is what the practice of self-mastery is, right? To eradicate the disease of materialism, in the sense that we know it now, of wanting more and owning more. You know, this is what happens when the ego is in the driver's seat. You can't eradicate the ego. We need the ego. We need it under control. Spirit needs to be out front and taking lead with, you know, a brain balance and unification of thoughts, emotions, and actions. And I think that's what when I say the future it's going to be a completely different, higher state of consciousness. That's when this is what the individual is trying to attain, this practice within themselves. We need philosophers, not politicians.
Right.
Well said.
I concur. I saw James raised his hand. Did he want to say something? No, maybe not. Okay.
It might have been me. I raised my hand at one point, Nate.
Oh, go for it, man.
I had a little comment.
Chris?
I was thinking about what Douglas was talking about, and that one person asked him the question about, you know, what can we do about tyranny. And I was thinking about how much of that ancient symbolism that Douglas was talking about is all describing our own personal journey. And that's something that's been echoing in my thoughts recently about how, and I'd be curious to see what Douglas thinks about this. All those ancient stories are all telling us the same thing, that we have to evolve as people, that we have to grow up. And so each of our personal journey is really all we have to do. Speaking out and doing these things is part of that journey, but that's what we have to do.
I'm going to chime in on that. It's nice to meet you here, Chris, and I'm a fan of your work, so I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the input and all of it. But yeah, I'm thinking of the allegory in the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. Frodo is almost, the most vulnerable of the whole group, is the only one that has the courage to take the ring into Mordor and destroy this idea of man's law, which is represented by the ring. But when he decides to embark on that journey, the fellowship joins around him and offers all of the service that they can get him to help him do what they don't have the courage themselves to do. The whole point is that many hands make light work, and that no one can do it alone. We all need each other's support, but ideally we all need to make that journey and develop that internal courage and understand the need for it by understanding the suffering that coercive control would cause. And there's a lot more to say about it, but with regard to the symbolism, the idea that the dark occult is wielding the symbolism to mock us, well, that's true. But it's also that the universe itself would mock us with the symbolism, because it's compelling us to come out of that darkness and understand the symbolism and the necessity for it in its purest form. One of the things to understand about as a symbol is that it doesn't describe a dogma, so it's a forever unfoldment. As soon as we ascribe a dogma to a symbol, we've limited it. It's the same idea with putting labels on people or anything. We limit its potential. This is the idea, the same as the ineffable name of God. Once we put a label on it, it's no longer that thing, because it could never be that limited in its entirety. So the labels would limit us, and the universe is compelling us to raise up and understand the pure forms of the symbolism. But part of the understanding a pure form of symbolism is understanding its inexhaustible propensity, and then how that draws out the unfoldment from within. Once we've scoured the external environment to find the meaning of the symbol, we're forced to go within and look for the deeper meaning of the symbol. So it's a drawing out of the unfoldment. It's part of the importance of understanding symbolism. And one other thing about understanding the symbolism is that it has a natural order in the development of the religious thought and the development of the religious idea. And we need to understand that natural chronology to understand the purest forms, because that's how we can unravel the dogma and the later corrupted forms we call religion. So.
I don't see. Oh wait, let me see. Yeah, I don't see any more. Wait, Dinah. Oh yeah, Dinah Diaz says, where was there a war that commemorated the original divergence and movement of the Southern cult to the north?
I'm going to field that. It's a very advanced question, and it's a very legitimate question. And most of my work is about this. Part of the main primary points is that the big struggle in the priest class began when the mythos changed from stellar to lunar. because it's about a science about putting a finer point on time. So the problem with venerating in annual cycles is that time was kept in the great year cycle in the movement of the northern and southern, first southern and then northern circumpolar constellations, which monitored the great year cycle. So they were able to record and keep record of epochs of time. When we venerated in annual cycles, the stellar people knew that we could break our chronology and then ultimately lose pure forms of the mythology, which is what happened. So I would say the first big struggle happened when they transferred the mythos into the annual cycle. And then everything that's happened since then has been a contingency mystery school that was driven out of the Nile Valley, a sort of wandering mystery school, trying to keep the old mythos preserved, but even that was stagnating once it left Egypt. And then you have this phenomenon over epochs of solar temples being built on stellar and lunar hallowed ground. And that comes all the way up into, prehistory, where we still have evidence, like the Minoan civilization was a remnant of the stellar mythos. So a lot of that's probably why the Mycenaeans and the Minoans were left out of history, because they still had evidence of the struggle between the ancient stellar temples and the solar temples wanting to absorb their symbolism and then build their solar temples on top of the stellar temples. It's a big subject, and but that's how I would basically answer that question.
Did anybody else want to take that question or add to it?
No, I don't think,
Um,
yeah, go ahead if you want, but I think I covered it pretty good.
So the Julia Felix says, this may be off topic, is common law and natural law similar, the same, or different?
Anyone?
You guys want to take that?
Yes, I'll answer that. A very common question. No, it is not. They're completely different. Common law is man's law. It's there. It's I would say it's almost a more occulted version of legalese. It's still their language. It's still talking their language. It is not talking about the actual laws of nature. That's a common question. So short and sweet.
I can further expound on that a little. Common law comes from the situation that we have that's unique to England, which is different than continental Europe. In continental Europe, it was the absolute power of the king. But in Britain, in the history of Britain, the power was shared between the throne and the land barons, or the land owners, or the aristocracy. And that's what led up to the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta was based on the common law from before the Norman invasion of 1066 and the old laws of William the it's escaping me, but from Harold II and William the it's escaping me, but William before Harold II. So the old laws of England were based on before the Norman invasion of 1066, and that's where we get the idea of common law, that it's on the ground and that power is shared with the landholders and the throne of England. And one other thing, and there's a lot more to it, but I want to make one more point about that since the topic is on the table, is that that's part of the reason that the ancient knowledge survived into the modern world, is because the different situation in England than that of continental Europe. that's part of what allowed the culture to survive long enough to carry some of these ideas into the West. And then with the emergence of the mystery schools post-Renaissance. So it's the uniqueness of the English history that gives the idea of common law. And the idea of common law is that it doesn't come from a top-down hierarchy. So, and there's a lot more to it, but it's a great question.
Well, I don't see any more questions. If anybody wants to chime in on that, or if anybody else has anything to say, we might be getting off here in a minute or two.
I just want to say great job to all the speakers. You guys did a phenomenal job, and I really appreciate your participation in the event. Great job on the control panel team, Tyler Bloyer and Lawrence Driggs and Brandon Martin. Great job. And we got a whole nother day of jam-packed speakers, or a whole nother jam-packed day of great speakers tomorrow. We'll have Indica Martin at 10 a.m., Brian Esterday at 10:30, Ryan Swisher at 11:30, Brandon Martin 11:45, Nate Cap 1 p.m., Logan Hart 3:30 p.m., Colin Smith 4:15 p.m., musical performance at 5:45 p.m., and then Mark Passio at 6 p.m. And you can find more information on the One Great Network.com, or at onegreatnetwork.com and thecubbyhole.com. And you can find donation pages there if you want to make a contribution, and that's always much appreciated, because these guys are giving their entire mind, body, and soul to help bring us out of this darkness of this ignorance. And so it should be another exciting day tomorrow. So thanks everyone who participated, and great job, everyone. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I really appreciate Autonomy for all the work that they have done, and that's including Tyler and his crew, and of course the onegreatworknetwork.com for streaming this all day. I really appreciate it, Mark Passio. So yeah, we're gonna have a really, really solid day tomorrow too. So definitely get your sleep, and we will see you tomorrow. Great questions, by the way, too. All right, guys.
I'll take us out then. So this is Douglas Martin signing off for the SEED 4 conference. Thank you. And I hope you've received value from the information presented here today. Tune in tomorrow starting 10 a.m. and we'll have another full day of great speakers and great presentations. Until then,
good night, guys.
Douglas Martin signing off. Good night.
All right, I went ahead and stopped the stream.
could still be on the One Great Work Network. Good job, everyone.